Instagram people, YouTube people. 5 days
website people.
5 days of self-care in full, serious self-care in full effect.
What's up, everybody? What's up? We got on
we're
my
so
page
cozy.
over here.
I know.
We got all these cameras. We need to have somebody direct into this camera, that camera, that
We
camera.
can switch around a bit.
All of us are gonna be. It's gonna look like a chameleon, where their eyes just like are going. Like, they're just gonna start changing directions.
All right.
So
do it.
Is it time? Is it time? It is.
I think it's time.
I think it is time. Let me turn my cell phone off. Don't turn your phone off.
I just want to introduce Henry here.
Yeah, that's Henry. This is actually all really about Henry.
We're interviewing Henry. Practices serious self-care.
Serious.
Please listen. If you want to learn about self-care, Henry's the one that he's
Henry the dude.
He's the dude, the guru.
So, hi, Cavin.
Hello.
What up, brother?
What up, man?
Oh, man.
So we decided, since we're like all in the same place. Oh, you need to scoot in a little.
I'm scooting.
Cozy. Okay. Since we're all in the same place, we should just do this in the same place instead of virtually.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, any excuse to see you is always wonderful. And Henry clearly
has
his opinions on it.
Nice.
Yeah. So before we dive into, we're going to see this a bunch of times today. Okay. And if it's backwards on your screen, don't worry that we have lots of screens where it's right way or whatever. Anyone tuning in from the website, I also have the link for you to purchase the book right above the video. So go ahead and do that if you see it. And we're going to start, first of all, just by saying today is like awesome that we're doing this today.
Yeah.
Awesome, cathartic, interesting, heavy, all the emotions wrapped into one. Because today is actually the day that Cavin almost died, died and survived beyond.
This is the anniversary of when I sustained severe traumatic brain injury, was instantly unconscious, and given less than a 10% chance of recovery beyond a vegetative state.
Right.
Wow. I mean, that's incredible. So for those of you who don't know, right? You didn't introduce a full introduction.
Well, I wanted to start with the day.
Oh, okay.
So the reason that, we didn't talk ahead of time of what today was, we literally were just like, I hit him up and I'm like, hey, do you want to come? We're doing this 5 days of serious self-care. We'd love to have you come on. He's like, wow, that's kind of weird because that's the day that's the 7-year anniversary since the accident. So before, now we can get into the who beyond the what. Because like Cavin just said, he literally wasn't even expected, as most cases are not expected to A, survive, B, survive, and ever thrive or have a semi-normal life again beyond being bedridden, and maybe slightly more than that. And so that's what we're going to talk about today, is because, we hear a lot of people with self-care and they're talking about massages and things like that are important and they're great and everything. But there are some people that had to learn serious self-care because their life depended on it or their quality of life depended on it. And you are certainly no exception. And you're changing or out to change a whole industry around self-care, and that's healthcare for self-care.
Self-care is the new healthcare.
Right.
It's definitely the new healthcare. And, coming from a perspective of being a healthcare professional for 25 years, working in hospitals, what you're teaching people what you're teaching people in this book is absolutely crucial to people learning about how to care for themselves through nutrition. So thank you, for bringing this to light. And, as a professional, the things that I learned a great deal about nutrition in nursing school and throughout my nursing career, and some of the common sense things that would make sense, like tube feedings and feeding people whole foods through tubes, as opposed to the stuff that's milled up in factories, is such an important aspect of what you teach in this book. It's awesome, man. Thank you for such an incredible gift.
And we'll definitely talk more about that because it's a huge part of Cavin's mission now and moving forward, or at least a good facet of it anyway. So let's now take it kind of back to, what At what point do you even remember this process? Because I was in a coma, I don't remember anything. I mean, I remember pretty far after, but I don't remember much, but I wasn't in the hospital as long. So for you, what was that? At what point do you remember, and what was your first kind of thought?
It was one of those things where I woke up. My first memory is actually waking up in a white walled room with a man and a woman talking to me, and I felt warmth from both of them, but I didn't recognize like that. Like I didn't know who they were in like position them as far as our relationship went. Like I had no episodic memory, so I didn't have memory of like past events. I did have a type of memory, innate memory, where basically I see a person, I feel warmth, right? So, so actually, the first words I heard were, "Cavin, it's your mom. You're okay." And I mean, at the time, this isn't how it went, but like repiecing things back together, I essentially looked at my mom and was like, "Well, I feel warmth towards you. Yeah, you're probably my mother." You know, because I also had memory of facts and vocabulary and language, but I lost episodic memory. So I was basing things off of, what little part of my memory I had to rely on. So she said that she was my mom. I feel warmth. Cool. You're my mom. But then at one point, I remember looking at the man and then looking at my mom and being like, "Where is my father?" And my father was right there. That's who the man was. And she was like, "Cavin's right here." And I just saw how my spotted memory had like hurt so bad, and so it was really tricky to put everything back together, the memory, the pieces of that. And I mean, the thing is, I was awake before then, and there's video of me awake before then, and I have no idea. I don't even recognize that person. I mean, it's clearly me, but I'm like, I have no memory of that at all. Zero, right? Complete blackness is what it was for me. Just nothingness, right? And then coming out, it was similar. I made this comparison. It was similar to all night binge drinking episodes I've had in the past.
And then you see the pictures the next day.
Right. Yeah, this was by far the worst hangover ever.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
5-month hangover. Yeah.
And far worse,
Plus,
for sure.
yeah.
Far worse. So at what point when did you start to make the connection that, first of all, you'd be able to build some of this back? And, was this like something you felt within yourself, or was it people around you or doctors around you? Because I feel like when it comes to recovery, who's around you has a huge part in how you recover.
I work with clients often who have a loved one in a situation like I was in. And the greatest predictor for a successful recovery is the support system. That's the greatest predictor. If you could bottle that stuff, it would be a blockbuster drug.
Right.
It's so imperative. So for me, I was in this place where I needed to find motivation, right? Nobody's gonna get me better. I mean, they'll get me better to a point, but I recognize that, like, all right, and this is kind of after the fact, but like recognizing that the treatments for brain injury are not like, here, take this pill and you're good and you're good to go. Actually, the treatments for just about anything, it's not really the case, take this and you'll be fine. Like, that's kind of a model that Americans like to pretend is the case. It's not the case. And we're all seeing that now, right? And So while I was recovering and understanding that I needed to put forth the effort if I was going to get well, and then recognizing that in the future, I kept on being told of this window of rapid recovery in the first 1 to 2 years, depending on the therapist I spoke to, and either way, I didn't have time to waste. That was a short period of time, and I was going to try as hard as I could to recover what I could. Because in the future, I looking back with regrets wasn't an option. I wanted to be able to be like, whether I got better or not, I wanted to be able to look back and be like, well, you know what? I tried as hard as I could.
Well, and it's like at the end of the day, it's like you're still so young that the idea that the rest of your life, it's like the max effort right now partially determines what the rest of that looks like.
Right.
So that's not even a try. That's like, I'm going to exhaust all
Yes.
efforts because this is my only shot. There's no redo in 10 years.
Right.
Like, it's make or break right now.
Talk about burning the ships. Like, they're gone.
So how far after you started to, regain your faculties, did you decide that this was going to be your mission?
And explain to people too what all you had to recover from.
Okay, so I was eating through a tube in my belly. I didn't eat, walk, or talk for months. Like, my left toe was completely pointed down, pronated. It was I called it my ballerina foot because it was just pointed like a ballerina. My left hand was like this, and that was terrible because my mind would be like, move your left hand, and nothing would happen. And I couldn't walk. Additionally, I had a broken left ilium and a broken right ilium and a broken right sacrum.
Ugh.
I had 3 cracked ribs on my left side. I had a lacerated or deeply cut left kidney. Both my lungs were severely bruised. And so, yeah, I was in bad shape. I didn't eat, walk, or talk for months. Left hand totally flexed inward. I was breathing through a tube in my neck, and I was receiving nutrition through a tube in my belly. And by nutrition, like we touched on, we're talking about corn syrup and soy protein and canola oil.
Right.
Yeah, really, really rough stuff. And so what it comes down to is that I needed to regain a lot of faculties, and so much played into that. I mean, my physical therapist, my occupational therapist, love the work they did, and they really helped to bring me back. But at the end of the day, again, they're coaches. You're the athlete. You need to rock it.
Yeah.
And so at one point, I was steered towards a nutritional protocol. Essentially, I was steered towards a functional neurologist, and the first thing he did was a blood test. It showed that I had low protein levels. Certain amino acids were low. And I was like, Doc, that doesn't make sense. I eat meat with every meal. I have a protein shake every morning. What do you mean? Eat more meat? And he's like, no. You're not absorbing the nutrients you're ingesting. And he began to explain leaky gut or intestinal permeability, which totally went over my head at that time. But I did it because, again, I'm not looking back with regrets.
Right.
And so after less than a month of doing it, I began to regain clarity, like huge noticeable change. And I was like, there's definitely something in nutrition. So I used that regained clarity and I began to study, like my life depended on it, because it did. I was studying nutrition, metabolism, digestion, neurometabolism, or how the brain derives energy, mechanisms of neuroplasticity, and how the brain rebuilds connections and builds new connections. I started taking online courses from top universities like Duke and Cal Polytech and the University of Chicago, mostly about brain neuroplasticity and physiology to really understand what I would need to understand to rebuild what was so damaged. But nutrition played a huge part in giving me the ability to learn everything else. And that's why I wrote the book, to provide the resource. I mean, all the work I do is to provide resources that I wish I had.
Right.
And additionally to make those resources like I saw the power of everything I'm doing, because everything I'm doing to feed my brain, my damaged brain, feeds the brain cells, the neurons and the glia of even a healthy brain. So it's super valuable information whether you have a brain injury or not.
So if you were to give someone advice that's just going through a hard time, whatever that means to them, anyone that has to change habits, it's super hard, right? You weren't given a choice. You could have just said,
Right.
Given up. But what would you say to anyone watching that, as far as like sticking with it long enough to see, right? Like if you wouldn't have given yourself that chance for that month of changing the diet and seeing the noticeable difference, that makes it really easy to make choices when you see that big of a difference. It's like, you're done.
You're done, buddy.
Did it just cut off?
Yeah, mine just cut off.
Sorry, we have
plugged it into
recording.
like 10%. That's what I was doing, if y'all are wondering. It's like my phone's gonna die. It totally just died.
It totally.
So. Sorry guys.
I know. They'll catch the replay.
Hopefully. So the motivation. There's two main things that really motivate. One is necessity. You have to, right? And while I felt like I had to, the way I felt like I had to was actually purposeful as well. And necessity and purpose are the two main motivators that I know of. And for me to feel like it was a necessity, it was finding purpose. And I didn't have purpose in myself at first, honestly. But I had friends and family there every day playing cards with me or, hanging with me. And it was just like, I was doing it for them. I needed to get better. I had to. It was a necessity for those people that were showing their love. And I write that in my book. Actually, the acknowledgments and appreciation section is like 12 pages long, and it doesn't even scratch the surface of the amount of appreciation I have for every. I could have written a tome of appreciation, but that's where the purpose came from, was within that. And finding that motivation, finding that purpose is a powerful, extremely powerful aspect that we need to do in order to make these changes, make whatever changes for self-care, for whatever, finding the purpose within yourself and moving forward with that.
So what do you feel like you learned through that? I'm sure you learned lots of things through this process, but what do you feel like is one of a few of the takeaways of everything that happened? Because it's like sometimes crazy stuff happens and it's kind of to align you with this purpose.
Yeah. I was going to say, what did you learn? Don't go on a water tower that's wet and swing down and try to help a buddy while you're drinking. Don't do that.
Don't do that.
No. What what I really, some of the greatest lessons came from this, and the greatest purpose came from this. Um, so the spiritual um, enlightenment, if you will, like the understanding that I have of how the world works expanded so much. And I was talking to a friend the other day, and he was like, if you didn't have a brain injury, you would have done something cool. You knew me before, and you would have written a book about like cocktails or something like that. And I'm like, I've always been a purposeful person, but I didn't have a purpose.
Mm.
And that's one of the gifts I found in my circumstances, is that it is now my mission to positively affect the most lives in the greatest way. And through this entire, the pain, the anguish, the frustration for me and for my family and loved ones, the greatest gift of that is that I'm now able to positively influence far more lives in a much greater way.
Yeah, and you are for sure. And we haven't even gotten into part of what this whole mission moving forward is. Like you are already helping, loved ones who are trying to help maybe a family member or a child or someone that's suffered a severe brain injury. You're also talking about changing the whole healthcare industry, because for anyone watching right now that doesn't know, if you're on feeding tubes, the quality of the ingredients they're putting into you is what no one would eat, especially on a regular basis. And this is expected for your recovery period. And it's toxic. And a lot of these ingredients are known to be now, but for changes to be enacted or to be, for it to evolve takes time. So even once they know something mainstream, it could be 10 years, 20 years before it changes in the healthcare system.
And when you think about it, the healthcare system is run by corporations. So if they have a bunch of stuff in stock in warehouses and places, they're not trying to change anything until they sell out of all the stuff that they've created already and made as much money as they can possibly make off the formulas and stuff that they have. And being in healthcare for the amount of time that I've been in it, I've watched these things graduate very slowly as supplies are exhausted before they move on to something that works better or something that works more effectively for human beings. So it's really important that we know that we go into things armed with education and armed with the amount of knowledge, the most amount of knowledge that we can. And it's people like Cavin that and thank you for what you've endured to bring this to the world, brother, that are bringing light to this at light speed, as quickly as possible. And this is why it's so important for people to get out and read books and pay attention to what's going on. With the advent of the internet and the communications that we have now, we can bypass the textbooks, we can bypass the pharmaceutical companies and all of this other stuff and do care for ourselves without having to wait for medicine, without having to wait for big pharma or anything else, or even agriculture to catch up. We can do this stuff now. And thank you, man. Really appreciate it.
I really appreciate what you were saying about the industry and all this. And I mean, it used to be that we would have somebody on a large news broadcasting thing like whistleblowing or whatever.
Yeah.
And then they just cover it up and be like, oh, it's conspiracy theorists and yada yada. And what you're talking about is economics 101.
Right.
Like supply and demand. If we have a bunch of supply here, then we can create the demand.
Right.
Like that's a fact. We can create demand by simply like setting up contracts and whatever. And if people gotta eat, we can have them eat corn syrup. and soy protein isolate, and corn maltodextrin, calcium caseinate, and canola oil. And that's what we have a huge supply of. It's shelf stable. It lasts forever, and this is what we're going to be feeding people. So I appreciate what you're saying there, and I also really appreciate the idea of like going out, educating yourself. Because that's exactly what I did with my clarity was I was reaching out to practitioners. I was learning. I was reading blogs. I was listening to podcasts, and then I learned how to read peer-reviewed literature, and I began combing medical journals and learning everything I could straight from the source, right? And that's what's amazing about the internet. Actually, you might have read in the acknowledgments and appreciation, I'm like, this might seem a little silly and obvious today, but I'd also like to thank the internet.
Sure.
Because honestly, and it's true for many people that are put in these situations where it changes your life so much to the point where you need to study like your life depends on it. It does, right? So when that happens, you do exactly that.
Yeah.
And the internet, especially when you can't go to the library,
Right.
Yeah.
you're bedridden. I'm really learning how to walk, but I'm able to search and look for things and bring up articles and understand them as best I can, and at the same time, reach out to practitioners around the globe.
Yeah, I think it's what you've done and what you're doing is important because physicians in my experience as a nurse, the physicians that I've worked with have had a great deal of inner turmoil because the textbooks and the stuff that they learn in medical school and stuff that they have to learn is conflicting with publications like JAMA, the Journal of American Medical Association, and they're even conflicted with the periodical is conflicting with the whole organization because there's different information, and as more information comes out, it comes out from JAMA first, and a lot of people don't read it. Like they get it, they have these subscriptions to it, but it just gets thrown on the shelf because they're too busy. So when you bring something like this for the layperson to read that they can empower themselves with, it is one of the most powerful things in the world. And when you can get a physician to slow down and actually read what you're doing, it makes them say, "Holy cow!
I didn't think about it.
What the hell?" Yeah,
Even stuff in here you wrote about. Tah's like, I'm a medical professional that's consciously aware of a lot of things, and there's things I had not considered.
It's things I had not considered. Like, I mean, that was one thing when I was in the hospital and I'm jamming these tube feeds down into people's bodies, and I'm like, I would never like you're this is the face when you're pouring this stuff in the bag. Your face is this, and the way it smells, you're putting your face in it, and it's like you have to jam this stuff down people, and you watch it come out of them. You watch it go in one side, it comes out the other. Most of it's undigested. It's terrible stuff. And I've always thought, man, I wish these people could get real food. And I never thought about it until looking into this book about puree and stuff, making a soup out of it, and actually putting some whole foods into the people that you love, man. So I
was saving this part today because I was like, where was it?
I think it's incredible, man. I think.
Oh no, that's the recipe I want.
I think that it's groundbreaking. And it's so simple. Yeah. It's like, how did we not think about this? How have we not said, listen, you're at home,
so obvious.
You're home, you're in control of your nutrition. Don't pump this Ensure or this Jevity into this person. What was their favorite food? Did they like it? Cool. Let's throw it in a blender. Let's make a burger, throw it in a blender, and then put it in through the tube. Let's see how they react. And we, this is something that I've never considered. And I think that it's wonderful. And there's a ton of stuff like this in this book. And if you have anybody, if you yourself have any issues with memory and brain stuff, you just want clarity, this book is so important for you to get and read because it's like, how did I not think about that? How did I not know this? Why are they not teaching this stuff in school? How come this isn't taught in high school? This stuff isn't taught in high school. It's not taught in college. It's definitely not taught in medical school. And nursing, we get a very full curricula for nutrition, and they teach us all of this stuff. And we're out there teaching the physicians about stuff. and us and the nutritionists and the dietitians, we teach the doctors about this stuff, but nobody in the lay world is taught this stuff. And it's so important for people to know this information. It's so important. If there are any physicians watching this, it's so important for you to get this book and learn this stuff. It's important. Get it?
Thank you.
We're not getting any kickbacks, y'all. This is some serious stuff. And I mean, I'm very passionate about this because it means a lot to me, because I'm learning about this and I can bring the stuff that I learned through this. And I do a lot of reading. The stuff that I learn from the things that I read, I bring to the people that I work with, and I bring to you, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls on the internet. So whatever I learn, whatever I'm being taught, I teach. And that's how we should do. I think that information is something that we should be able to spread around. And this man, he's got some information for you, so you better pick that up.
Well, and it's really to consider, not just for yourself, but this is an information that, you know, when you are having to do it at a time when your life or your loved one's life depends on it, this is stuff that we should know already, so that when things happen, we know how to immediately respond.
Start implementing this.
Yes, because there's so many things that, you know, what Tah and I deal with is body intelligence. And if a body was exposed to things like, say, certain foods, he was saying that you knew worked for the person's body before, or they were very healthy, you knew what kind of foods they consumed to have a healthy body, it would make sense to then roll some of those foods into their recovery period instead of, because I don't know, you know, especially what someone's diet was before, if all of a sudden they're getting all of these just like sugars and, you know, proteins and things that the body's not used to having, that it would actually be detrimental in some ways and slow down. Yeah, they're getting some sort of nutrients,
and where are the nutrients derived from? You know,
Yeah.
what are they based off of? Are they made in a lab, or do they actually come from a plant or an animal? It's really important for these things to be considered when you're thinking about the nutrition. And I'm telling you, if any of you have ever picked up a can of Ensure and looked, like Ensure doesn't really get used for tube feeding, but they have things called Jevity and Oscal and all these different things. The stuff that's in these cans is horrible.
I do see it in like nursing homes and retirement homes.
Yeah, I actually
it's
have
horrible.
Ensure.
Yeah. Oh, you did.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
it's
actually
horrible.
requested Ensure over the Jevity.
But that's like less poison, you know, or less low quality.
It's all
Yeah, it's
bad.
all
I know.
it's all
It's
pretty
all
terrible.
bad,
It's
yeah.
all- it's all pretty terrible.
You know, I wanted to say that this has been done before. This was the way things were. We would blend gastric feeds for patients until around the 50s or 60s, when these companies came in and were like, no, we're gonna make different feeds for the patients.
Cheaper doesn't go bad.
Cheaper doesn't go
High
bad. This
calorie.
works. Yeah, and then the other part of that is that we do these studies that are based on, like, you know, double-blind placebo controlled, like, here we go, this needs to work every time for the majority of people,
Right.
kind of thing. Like, it's not individualized medicine at all. And what you were saying, like, this is what this person has been eating, and this is what they love eating, and that sort of thing can be very valuable. It can also not be.
It can, yeah,
Sure.
definitely.
So like,
Yeah, depending on what those things.
Yeah,
Don't just start
exactly.
putting milkshakes.
I'm all
I was
about-
throwing a Snicker bar in the
That's
blender.
basically what we
It is
do.
Ben and Jerry's.
That is basically what we do now.
But like what you're saying with body intelligence, like when you can clear the muddy waters. I used to work for a functional nutritionist named Andre Nakayama, and you can learn more about her on my website. But she does a process where the first move is to clear the muddy waters, meaning to heal everything that's not healed. You know, remove the inflammatory substances and let the fire die down a little bit, so that we can see what's going on. Because yeah, if your body intelligence is not there when you're craving donuts, you definitely aren't there yet. You know, your body doesn't want donuts. It doesn't ever.
True.
Right. I mean, that's a lot of what we talk about is, we say similar radio signals. We're like, if the radio signals of your body are confused because of inflammation,
Right.
it can't tell you what it actually needs because it is having withdrawals or addiction symptoms or just a chemical alteration. And inflammation can cause so many issues. That is it an inflammation issue? Is it a leaky gut issue? Is it, and it's like you have to start by ruling those things out with proper nutrition and give the body an environment to heal. And then what do we have left and how do we work with that? But those two things are like the biggest components that have to go first. We won't even work with someone that won't change their diet to address inflammation first, because if you tell me you have fibromyalgia and you aren't willing to check with diet first, that could be the sole thing. So we could spend money and time, and the thing you're most resistant to is the most important to do first.
Yeah, and it's the easiest to do. Digging into your emotional well-being is difficult. Going out and exercising and learning an exercise plan is challenging. You can just throw some different food on your plate. It's one of the most accessible things to a human being.
I will say, I think those are intertwined.
It is.
Right.
I think they're very intertwined.
I think they are as well.
Emotion and food and habits, and I mean the neurology. Our foods are addictive. We are addicted to the foods we eat.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And breaking any addiction is no small task.
No, it is not.
We have 12-step programs with community support just to make that happen with drugs, right? But it's almost more ingrained when it's food, right? We have an even more just extremely close relationship to our food. And we have that relationship when it's inflammatory for us.
Right.
Because when it's inflammatory, that releases endorphins and things of that sort, which excite us, which wake us up. And so then we become addicted to the inflammatory food because it's inflammatory.
Agreed.
So breaking that is, so that's why I'm saying that I think those are intertwined. And sometimes we need to find a way to get the emotional state in a place where it can make the nutritional changes, because that's when it becomes easy.
Yeah.
Agreed.
It's that, and that's the thing is it's simple in application.
Yeah.
Not easy in
Easy.
Right. It's
carrying it out.
my mention was that it's accessible.
Yes.
It's easily accessible, not easily done, easily
Yes.
accessible. It is right there. Nutrition is something that we have access to,
And that anyone could do
partic-
right now without expertise.
particularly in this country. We have access to a myriad of nutritional choices. We were in what store were we in the other day? We were in HEB the other day, and I was like, look at how many thousands of items there are in here. We have so many choices for nutrition, and then it's like they're swaying you with the colors of the boxes, they're swaying you with the ads, they're swaying you with all this stuff. So the emotional component is there. I'm merely saying that we have access to it. So that is something that we have access to, and since we have access to different types of food, we do have access to that ability to grab onto this stuff and do this. The key is to be educated. The key is to have the support, and these are the things that you are talking about. That first thing is that support system. The next thing is that education, and then when you combine those two together, you can get people to open things up. So I mean, this is what I was actually going to ask you about, and I've been dying the whole time to ask you about the things that you have the nutrition and the education in the book. What are the tips do you have for people in conjunction with these things to make it a well-rounded experience for a human being?
Nice. Thank you. Actually, my next book that I'm working on is going to be called How to Feed a Mind, because our mindset is so important, and understanding that where we choose to place our attention and what we choose to focus on really determines our feelings. And our feelings are the greatest influencer of our actions.
Yes.
So we had this whole thing. I used to think that we could control our thoughts. And then I was like, no, No.
Good luck with
I
that.
mean, yeah.
Good luck with
We can't control our thoughts, and like, yeah, you can. Like, if a gunshot goes off, guess where your attention goes? You're like, who's shooting, right?
Yeah.
Like, it
You
demands,
react before you even have time to
Yeah,
think.
yeah.
that. Consciousness goes to the places with most noise.
demands our attention,
Mhm.
right? So, so that changes our thoughts, of course, right? But our attention, we have control if we possess the ability to control our attention. And this is where meditative practices come in. I think that's one of the greatest skills I've learned from having a meditation practice is being able to direct my attention, right? And so I think that tool, being able to control where your attention's going and influence how you feel, that's, I mean, who doesn't want to feel good, right?
Right.
So if you are able to influence your feelings, that influence your doings, and that influences the world. You know, you're influencing what you do, influences what other people think,
Right.
which influences what they feel,
Right.
which influences what they do, and on, domino effect.
Right.
You know, so the main aspect there is taking control of your attention, and learning to give yourself the feelings that you want by focusing your attention where you want it and creating the relationships you want.
Yeah, you know, one of the things that I learned, so when I got a motorcycle license back and rode for a long time. I love riding a motorcycle. It's not the safest thing in the world, but you know, I love it.
Love riding
Love it.
motorcycle.
And one of the things that you learn is that you have to focus your attention where you want to go. So if I'm driving down the street and I see an object in the road, if I focus on the road, I'm going to hit it on a motorcycle, because it's wherever your attention goes is where the bike goes. So if something happens over here, the best thing to do is to stay looking forward or away from the distraction or obstruction or whatever, because if you turn your head, you're going right towards it. And it was such a deep lesson for me for life, that where your attention goes is where you go. So if you're like, oh no, there's a catastrophe over there, if you turn because you're so afraid of hitting it or that it's going to happen, it will. Versus being like, I see it, it's clear that it's there, I'm going to stay on this path and, you know, and either get away from it or whatever. And the thing is, it's, you know, there's obviously extenuating circumstances, but it's understanding that, like you said, things are going to happen, you're going to react. But what you do from after the reaction sets in, of shifting the focus, shifting the observation, shifting the how you're handling it. Because in time, how you handle it will change the way you react. So it's kind of like the sooner you catch yourself in the reaction process, it kind of gets shorter. Where in reactions, there's a pause where you're like, oh wait, like it still stopped me, but I didn't react in that moment.
Yes.
And I also wanted to bring it back to what you said for feed a mind, because the thing with like how to feed a mind is, we talk about this a lot. The brain and the mind are not the same thing. People will interchange those two words, but the brain is like the anatomical, like actual organism, in your skull and part of your body. Your mind is the consciousness. So we feed the brain for the body, you know, for all of the connections. That doesn't necessarily impact the consciousness, but it can impact the connection of the consciousness to the brain or the consciousness to the body.
So this is the way I tell people about it when I speak to them about it, and that was pretty awesome, by the way. So the way the way I tell people is, your mind has to connect to your body. So your mind is part of consciousness, which connects all of this stuff, right? Let's say we are our own independent branch of connection of a perspective for consciousness. The more healthy your brain is, the more efficient the connection to consciousness is. So when your brain is optimal, you can tap into your psychic abilities. You can tap into
Access more of the
access
consciousness.
more of the consciousness. And you have those old moments and with the woo people talk about, I got another download. You're able to get this information from the wellspring of all things by keeping your eyesight clear, by keeping all these things. You can pull in from different perspectives of consciousness. So when you say to feel, as soon as you said the feet of mine, I got goosebumps. See, I'm on right. So I'm very attuned to my body, right? So when something resonates well, I get goosebumps on my arms all the time, and it's just like, oh, feet of mine, that's awesome, because people are so into my mind, my brain being the same thing, and it's not the same thing. So when you get your body to communicate with your consciousness, with your mind, and you got that back and forth download, upload, download, upload, download, upload going on, it's perfect. I can't wait for that book.
Well, and especially for people that, that are always talking about biohacking, we're like, look, that's great, but you need to biointegrate. You need to actually, like, once you got in there, right? If you just break into a car and you have to hotwire it, that's not really a sustainable way for the car to function. It's like having a key is much better. So we're just like, fine, you hack into it. Now let's make it a sustainable back and forth where you're a part of the vehicle instead of you just broke into it. And the thing is if you're feeding the mind, feeding the brain, feeding the body, with all of those, you've got almost like this trifold connectedness of intelligence, because you have the instinctual intelligence that if a car is coming tells you to get out of the way. You have the mind intelligence that's analytical and assessing things. And then having like the actual brain being healthy enough to transmit and have basically the optimal performance of all the information from instinct and from consciousness. That's why diet matters. That's why how you fuel it matters. So when people are like, no, I eat pretty good and I function pretty well, I'm like, really? Because let's talk about that for a minute. It's never actually the case.
Yeah, the brain functions at a pace that's so fast, it's ridiculous. So when the body needs to do something in an emergency basis, it can cut the mind out completely. That's why we have these blackout things, and it's like, oh my gosh, how did I get here? And there's a car crash.
Or if you were me, Ambien for 2 years, lots of that.
So your brain can completely cut your mind out, so that the analytics and the questioning doesn't get in the way, and it will move you to a place where you're safe, and it'll let the mind back in. The brain is awesome, especially when it's optimal. And when you can get that toggle to happen fast so that the mind can jump in and be analytical with the body at the same time.
That's the second hand kiss.
Awesome, man.
So, we're gonna jump to our devices and see if anyone has any questions, because I'm gonna check the YouTube page. I don't know if you want to go through here, Tah, to see.
Let's see if anybody had any questions.
Your poor people were like, no.
Yeah, hey, what's up, Maureen?
You're like, no. Hey, Tah. Oh, we got some people.
Lena Marchman put the. Thanks, Lena, for the.
Yesterday. Oh, whoops. That's us again, guys.
Wow, a lot of people tuned in.
So man, there's so much to say.
We could keep this conversation going forever.
Because honestly, what you
what's up, Brad?
Talking about with
Londa said we still didn't introduce him.
We did? I mean, we got your name on everything. We're gonna share more anyway. Plus, we're gonna do a replay for anyone that might have missed parts of it. I'm gonna see if I have any questions on my side. You were gonna say.
I was gonna say, so the neuroscience, the brain plasticity, all these things. I as you were talking about integration, the brain-mind integration is so real, and we see neuroplastic changes in the brain through meditation, through spiritual practice, through controlling things, and additionally, mechanisms of plasticity really wire the brain and the mind.
Yeah.
And so, we were talking about how it's hard at first, then it gets easier. And I forget the exact words used there, but
once you see like some scalable like differences,
it's like, oh, I can change that, okay, and then it gets shorter and shorter. That your access to that area where the reaction happens, it comes in, and it's like, I think of it. Here's the analogy I draw to describe neuroscience. Imagine your brain as a garden. And you have 86 billion plants in that garden. You have 86 billion neurons in your brain. Your thoughts are like the seeds, and your attention, that's the sunlight and water. And if you ask any neuroscientist, any neurobiologist, anybody who understands brain plasticity, they'll tell you that those thoughts you give your attention to, those pathways you give your attention to, they grow. And they synapse and they get stronger. And knowing that piece, understanding that a couple aspects of neuroplasticity, neurons that fire together, wire together. Neurons that fire out of sync, break their link. Those two adages are really powerful. So if it's call and response, like every time something happens, you react in this way. If you can start to change that, so like you said, interrupt it and change it, then you can take that down more and more and more to where you no longer even have that reaction. Right? Like the same thing happens and it doesn't faze you anymore. It's really cool how that happens.
It's awesome. I think it's really awesome. And that's, that's part of what we're working on with our book, Expand to Experience, is teaching people to expand beyond that experience. So if your hand is let's see,
something to grab. When you travel full time, you don't carry a tremendous amount.
So if my hand, right? If my hand is my life experience, and this quarter is an event, right? This quarter is an event. It takes up a pretty significant amount of my hand, right? But if I expand my experience to the size of this book, it takes a lot smaller of real estate. So, and the same thing, if you were to put it up on this wall, it takes a lot less real estate. So when you expand, you start to expand the capacity of your brain, and you start to expand the capacity of yourself to be able to connect these synapses and stuff in your brain, and have that mental connection with things that are greater than locking into a small scenario. So when you lock yourself into small scenarios, including your family life, including your job life, including the life of your relationship,
or when a trauma happens,
and you hold on to that trauma, your brain actually wires itself into those experiences. So if you're in traumatic and crappy family relationships, your brain will wire itself to keep repeating, to stay in that situation. The same thing with your foods. If you keep eating a certain type of food, your brain will start to wire itself into this type of thing. It will start to wire itself into certain types of behavior. It will start to wire itself. So this is what neuroplasticity does. When you expand beyond that, you start to break those connections and you start to make new ones to new things. And if you keep yourself expansive and you keep expanded, you never really have a lock-in on something that you become severely attached to. So this is neuroplasticity, and it's a marvelous science, and this guy knows all about it. You should have that.
It's beautiful. The adaptability idea of just like when we make change our go-to, then it's weird to like have a locked in response to things. You know what I mean? Like for me, going out of my comfort zone is comfortable for me at this point. And when I'm not going out of my comfort zone, I'm like, something's not right.
That's me too, man.
Well, you reach a point that it's, if something makes me uncomfortable, I'm like, oh, well, then there's something there I need to see. So let me lean into this discomfort. And it doesn't mean it ever gets easier as far as the discomfort, but you realize the discomfort's a lot shorter if you just lean into it. Instead of, like, the analogy that I used not too long ago on my podcast was that, let's say you're in the middle of the desert and you see a sandstorm coming at you, and you're just like, oh crap, it's coming, right? You start anticipating that it's coming. There's nowhere to run. It's going to catch up to you. So you wait, and then it starts to catch up to you. You finally panic. You finally get out of that kind of like fight or flight or freeze situation. You start running from it. But now it's catching up to you. So now as it catches up to you, because you're running with it, afraid of it, you're running in it, which means you're actually making the process longer. Where I see it is if I just turn and go, all right, it's here. There is literally nothing I can do, and run through it. it's passing, I'm running, it's actually going to be a lot shorter. So that's a lot of how I see with challenging situations, jobs I don't like, whatever it is. It's like, all right, well, it's here now. Like, let's go because I can't outrun it.
Have you read Dune? Frank Herbert.
Yeah.
So in Dune, there's this saying that they say something about, I will face my fears and I will let them go through me. And it's the same thing. You turn around and you face that fear, and it goes right through you, and you have the experience, and then it's done. So yeah, that's Frank Herbert.
Awesome.
You guys are awesome.
You're
Thank you.
awesome.
Yeah,
I really,
yeah.
when you were like, let's just do it in person, I was like, oh, good that we can actually hang out.
Yeah.
This is day number 2 of people with capes, man. We gotta get a cape
People
for
with
this guy.
capes.
We gotta get a cape with a C on it. Put it on his back.
So you guys, anyone watching the replay, this is Cavin's book.
How to feed a brain. No,
And you need it. And this isn't, besides just giving you like a really practical, simplified idea of understanding just the reason why you need to eat some of the ways you need to eat in order to optimize. If you're a brain person and you're not eating to fuel your brain, you're like completely screwing yourself out of intelligence right now. Like that's like the bottom line.
And this is really important for the world we live in now. We live in a tech heavy world where people are in front of computers, where people are using a lot of this space, not just the brain, but the eyes, the ears, the nose. You're in front of a computer all the time. So to optimize your brain so that it's fed and it works properly with all this technology, it is imperative that you eat properly. If you eat like crap, and your performance goes low, and there's a very high performance time that we live in. So this isn't just for people with brain injuries. This isn't just for people who've been bedridden or have Alzheimer's or dementia or whatever. This is for everybody.
This is also to prevent that, by the way. As you start to do research into this idea of brain function and optimizing brain function, it is proven, and you're going to start to see more and more come out about this, that you can actually prevent some of these mental disorders that are, Alzheimer's, dementia, by diet. Like, it's that big of a deal, but you have to, the sooner you catch it, right? Or the sooner you start, then you're not going to even start to get those symptoms. So if it runs in your family, you can stop this from even activating in your genes if you actively do something about it now. And same thing, it's like if you were watching this video, share it, because a lot of people have a loved one in the hospital and their recovery could be dependent on the quality of the ingredients they're ingesting. And in his book, he even talks about gastric feed recipes and things they can be digesting, and organ meats, because taste isn't as important when you're dealing with a gastric feeding system. So you can help your family, you can help your friends by sharing this information, buying Cavin's book. Besides that, he's just wonderful. Even if this was a coloring book, I would still be just as excited.
It kind of has that flavor on it.
I mean, you could.
Like
There's some diagrams you could totally color.
Act now and get a box of colored pencils. It's
You
$2.99.
could color this little macro. No, it's not a macro. It's a.
But wait, there's more.
What is it?
There's more.
Marley?
But wait.
But wait, if you buy today, underneath Tah's video, for anyone watching on Tah's, I put the link to Cavin's book. You can go straight to Amazon, purchase, obviously leave a 5-star review, because why wouldn't you? And because he's awesome. And secondly, because the book is awesome. And if you're watching the replay video, thank you everyone for tuning in to our serious self-care week.
And thank you, Cavin. Tremendously, bro. Thank you for everything that you've endured to get you where you are, to give this gift to humanity, bro. It's
And to just be so wonderful.
I also want to give your audience, so a couple months ago, we launched the Feed a Brain interview series, where I interviewed some of the top brain nutrition experts of our time. Dr. David Perlmutter, Dr. Tara Walls, Nord Gaudas.
These are all the way like top industry people.
Datis Karazian, who he's amazing, wrote the foreword of my book as well, and many more. And I want to give your audience a sneak peek into it, where you get 10 minutes of free access to each of them and 50% off of the entire thing. So go to feedabrain.com/VIP.
Right.
For all you very important people.
Feedabrain.com/VIP. /VIP. Get your discount on, get your free information on. I mean,
Get your brain on.
Get your brain on. Get your brain on. And, you know, thank you all for tuning in. And remember to take care of yourself and each other. It's Jerry Springfield. I know.
Jerry Springfield? Isn't it Springer?
Springer, yeah, Springer. That guy. Jerry Springfield. Might need some brain food.
I was like,
Anyway.
Jerry Springer? Is that
Yeah,
like
anyway,
Seinfeld
Jerry
and
Springer. Anyway, now that I it up, messed up the joke, man. All right, so remember, nutrition is awesome. That connection with human beings is awesome as well, and it's nothing. You are nothing without other people and without your environment. So please,
And a team around you. If you don't have one, it's time to build.
connect, create a team of people that you are familiar with. If you're not familiar with your family, create a family. Love yourself, love the people you're with, give yourself good, wholesome food to eat, connect with your movement, connect with your environment. Don't forget to breathe. It's super important. All of that stuff is what we work with all the time. And one element is not going to do it all for you. You've got to have a well-rounded human organism. We love y'all.
Ciao.
Peace.